Welcome, everyone. I'm Dan Strafford, Senior Manager of Corporate Communications at Kaplan. I'm really excited to be here today with Dr. Andrew Temte, President and Global Head of Corporate Learning at Kaplan, as we discuss his new book, The Balancing Act, as well as our newly released companion podcast. Andy, first, I know I gave you a list of questions I was going to ask, but I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball here to start. What's it feel like to be a published author?
Well, before I get to that question, I just want to say that your introduction was a little weak. You are the incomparable Dan Strafford.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'll do better next time.
So back to the question. What was the question?
What's it feel like to be an author, a published author?
Oh yeah, it's weird because as a first-time author of something that is optional for people to read. I've been the author of many books previously where it was compulsory to read them, and so everybody that has to reads them.
Right.
But to be a published author where it's optional, it's a bit like a diesel engine. Unless I miraculously appeared on Ellen or Oprah or something like that and got those rocket boosters, but it's the feedback that you get from people that you don't expect, that just comes out of the blue. Oh, hey Andy, I read your book. I thought it was really cool. That is food for the soul.
That is great. And we talked through many a topic on the companion podcast that we have launched, which is now available on all the major podcast apps as of this afternoon. So I will give you more information about that in a little bit. But I wanted to give everyone who's tuning into this a little bit of context around your own career path and how that brought you to a point where you felt comfortable and in a position to write The Balancing Act and give this advice. So if you could, just the 30-second elevator pitch of your career, which I know is very, very long and has a lot of stops along the way, but if you could, to put some context around the conversation we're going to have.
Yeah, so started as a teacher, started in academics in classrooms of 30 kids, quickly went from there to professional education, built a small business that ultimately got sold to Kaplan, and here I am 21, almost 22 years later, and the career at Kaplan has not been the same job the whole time. I've been the dean of the business college at a university. I've been a president of university. I've been I've led professional education businesses, held the title of chief executive officer. So a lot of diversity in my role at Kaplan that I'm very thankful for.
And we do have a promo code for everybody watching. It's available starting at 8 p.m. Eastern time tonight over on Amazon and will run into May. It's 20% off. The code is 20 Temte 2021, so 20 TEMTE 2021, and that is over on Amazon. I'll share the link both in YouTube chat and LinkedIn. I also want to prompt everyone, feel free to ask questions. We're here to talk to Andy about his book and, of course, the podcast, but also want to engage in a conversation here around corporate learning, around management, about coaching, all things that Andy's leading here at Kaplan, but also he's done for so much of his career. I want to dive in. What really inspired you to write Balancing Act? So, what was it? A single moment? Was it the entirety of your career? What were the things that brought you to write the book and share your knowledge with the corporate space?
Yeah, back in 2017, I started writing stories that, and many of them ultimately made it into the book. But it was back in 2017, late 2016, where I thought, gosh, I really need to start writing some of this stuff down. And at the time, it really centered around the concept of the accidental manager, people that just kind of fall into managerial roles. Hey, Dan, you're really good at your job. Want to manage people? Want to make a little bit more money? And most people say yes to that,
right?
Without really understanding what the job is all about. So I wanted to give the community of leadership managers, just human beings generally, my portfolio of triumphs and mistakes that folks can learn from.
It makes a lot of sense, and you're sharing a lot in the book specifically, which I have a autographed copy of right here. I'm very, very, very proud to say. But you're sharing life stories, right? It's not a you need to do this. You're sharing from your own experiences, from what you've done, what you've learned, and I think that sets the stage so much for learning who you are as a person, but also learning who we can be as managers through the style that you've put forward. What I see you write about in the book is really based on an ability for an individual to be self-reflective and accountable to oneself. We've talked on the podcast, which I'll link out in the chat and in the comment section on LinkedIn, about therapy, about self-reflection, about meditation. What steps did you have to take personally to become a self-reflective manager, to be more confident in who you were yourself, to then help others?
Well, you talked about therapy, and my journey with therapy and counseling centered primarily around our marriage, but there was so many things that came out of that experience that I was like, oh wow, I can apply this at work. Oh wow, I can apply this at work, and just kind of over and over again, it was the probably the 40th time that somebody told me, Andy, do we need a contractor to come and widen the door for your ego to walk through? That I finally figured out that the world of work was, as the leader, did not center around me, but instead centered around all of the people that were with me on that journey. And so taking the tools from therapy and counseling, and tools from my yoga practice that I started getting into a few years ago, that's when it really dawned on me that me time, that self-reflection time where you take the wins and the losses from the day and really get deep with them, even just for a short period of time, can be really beneficial.
And that's one of the main cruxes or topics we dive into in the 9 episode arc, if you will, of season 1 of the podcast, The Balancing Act, which I just shared the link to over on iTunes. We're now live on iTunes and Google, Stitcher, Spotify, and on Amazon on Audible. So all of your major app out there for podcasts, you can check it out. Also check out some great artwork that was shared by Andy's son. So it's a family affair for this podcast. And what I loved about talking to you about all of this is hearing the process by which the book came out, but also where you've come to in your career, right? Like where you've gotten to, how you've gotten to this place. And it makes it, I think the podcast helps illuminate a lot of the stories in the book and make them that much more personable and actionable in ways. So I hope people check that out as well. Share it. Let us know. Comment on both all of those apps, and on YouTube. It'll be up over the next few weeks as well as a video series. But I wanted to transition to the idea of active listening, right? So we talked at length about that on the podcast. You talk about it in the book. Part of being able to be self-reflective is listening to others and give airtime and the ability for others to air out what they need to say and listen to them and be able to act against that. It really seems as though you have become an active listener, that you have chosen to give airtime to others. You're giving airtime to me right now, and provide space for people to lead even from behind, or lead not as a manager. How much of a focus was that for you? And how much work did it take? Like, how much time did you put in to become an active listener and make that more of your management style?
Yeah, it's a continual journey, and it's a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of a thing, because most of us like to hear ourselves talk, and
guilty
yeah,
as charged.
Yeah. And we get wrapped up in our own thoughts, and we're sitting in a conference room. Well, hopefully in the future we'll be back sitting in a conference room. But when other people are talking, we're typically thinking about what we're going to say next, so that we sound like we're the smartest ones in the room. The real knock over the head for me was when we were doing some cultural exercises at Kaplan Professional. This is about 10 years ago, And somebody wrote down that the culture of Kaplan Professional at that time was an Andy said culture, that nothing happened within the organization unless Andy said. Now, that has all sorts of connotations, but what it clearly said to me was I was doing too much talking. I was thinking I was the smartest guy in the room, and not listening enough. So that old adage that salespeople talk about, oh, we're born with 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. That's that. Not only is that hard to grasp, it's super hard to do in practice. And like I said, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Just a couple of weeks ago, I found myself talking way too much in a meeting, and I had to do a half halt and go, Andy, you open your ears
Right.
and get back to the business of listening.
We've discussed, and the anecdotes I can share is largely from a broadcasting background, but the greatest interviewers out there, those you mentioned Oprah earlier, she listens to the people speaking to her, and you can tell she's actively engaging with what they're saying rather than worrying about that next thing. And I think from a management style, you're describing the same. It's not always about plowing ahead and making sure that you have that moment to say what you want to say, but giving some space and some ability for others to do so. Now, reminding everyone, promo code 20Temte 2021 is 20% off over on Amazon. That starts at 8 p.m. tonight. I've dog-eared a bunch of pages in the book thus far for things that I want to go back to. I do have a one last curveball that I'll get to towards the end of our conversation from a specific quote from your book. But obviously, a lot of our past year has been pandemic focused, right? It has been so much about how businesses are resilient, a word you use often, how businesses are responding, how they're meeting their customers' needs, their employees' needs. Now, management has changed because of the pandemic. We're largely a virtual workforce. How has it changed your approach as a manager? Has there been a decided, flip of a script or change that you've made actively because of going to a largely virtual workforce?
Yeah, so the power dynamics within organizations have changed massively. So I'm sitting with a computer in front of me in my home office, and individual contributor XYZ is doing the same thing. I no longer have this powerful corner office overlooking the Mississippi River with the big conference table and all the dark wood and the trappings
Right.
of being the senior executive. And oh my goodness, I'm scared of Andy. And what they're scared of is maybe not the person, because I'm a whopping 5'7", 150 pounds, dripping wet.
Right.
I'm not a very frightening individual, but it's the position
Right.
that was scary, and all of those trappings. So leaders and managers have got to wrap their heads around this. Even if your organizational structure has not physically flattened with changes in job descriptions and titles, etc., it has effectively flattened with our now remote and soon to be primarily hybrid work environments. So one of the things that we talk a lot about in the book is coaching. And I believe strongly that this pandemic is a phenomenal opportunity for leaders and managers to really double down on their coaching capabilities. And if you're a leader or manager who has not invested any time or energy in really understanding what coaching is, how to effectively do it, and by the way, the active listening will come as a result of that, I strongly suggest that you do double down there, because that will pay. Becoming an active coach to your team members will pay tremendous dividends in the future.
I don't want to give away too much of the podcast because I want people to go download it. But one of the great conversations we had was around coaching and mentoring, right? And I think I would love for you to sort of describe what the difference is there to you. It's not an either or; it's a both and, right? You want to have coaches and mentors, but if you could, for those watching, what is a coach and what is a mentor throughout my career, your career, or person X's career who's working their way up the management ladder?
Yeah, so I like to use my hands and my fingers to describe this. So the number of mentors that I've had personally fits on this hand right here. And I'm not considering family members. I'm not
Right.
considering my dad and my mom and other folks like that. These are true business partners and former educators, other former bosses that have had a long-term impact on me as an individual. A mentorship or a relationship these are my opinions,
Yep.
is a sustained relationship, whereas coaching is an injection at a particular, it's a moment in time exercise. I'm playing football on the ninth grade football team at Lincoln Junior High School, right? And I have coaches and assistant coaches that are helping me as a defensive back, and the specific skills that are necessary to do the best job I possibly could. Which, by the way, my best was wrapping my arms around some guy's ankles who is twice my size and getting kicked in the face while he's dragging me down the field, and I ultimately laid that guy on the ground, right? So that, to me, that's the difference between a coach can become a mentor,
Right.
and a mentor can engage in coaching exercises, but it's that both and that you described.
And you've had a hand in a lot of coaching in your managerial career, and you also have two kids, and you have, I'm sure, have coached in many different facets of their lives across different things. From a professional sense, how do you formalize coaching, right? Like, is there an agreement? Is there a contract? Is there, like, how do you make that formal assessment that this person is going to coach me along this finite path? And then I'm going to, graduate. I'm going to whatever the process is to move on to your next coach.
Yeah, coaching today is still far too ad hoc, and formal coaching is still reserved for high potential employees and executive management. And I believe strongly that coaching needs to be democratized across organizations. And that means that coaching is the primary duty of a leader or a manager, so that you, as an individual contributor, are getting formal coaching from your leader and your manager, and that manager is being very purposeful about it, and is saying the words, okay, we're going to do some coaching right now, and this is the topic. There are also the wonderful thing about being in 2021 is there are wonderful tools that exist now.
Yep.
And Kaplan has one. It's called the Kaplan Performance Academy, where you can make coaching available digitally over tools like Zoom, with many more people in the organization. Coaching used to be reserved for if Dan Strafford was doing a bad job,
Right.
or was a challenged employee, and I needed to coach Dan out of that situation. It had a very negative connotation. We need to break that cycle, because coaching is a very, very positive thing. And if you get a coaching assignment in the company that you work for, you should take it as a benefit that your leader or your manager felt strongly enough about you and your future with the business to assign a coach and to invest that money in your development. That's how we got to start thinking about coaching.
You mentioned KPA, but even outside of Kaplan's offerings, the pandemic to an extent has almost democratized some of these processes, right? Like you now have access to people all around the globe who you may not have had previously, who have different life experiences than you do, or similar life experiences, but they live in the UK, or they live out in California, or they live in Oregon, or wherever it may be. East Coast bias here. I'm in Massachusetts. So you could tell by where I was telling everybody was. But I think that what KPA does, Kaplan Performance Academy, what coaching is, it's changing. To your point, it's you have access to so much more, and you have access to so many more people. And hopefully, when offered coaching, people understand that. To your point, it's not a net negative. This is to help. This is to help push you forward, and can really move the entire, rising tide lifts all boats idea here of everybody can benefit from that in a variety of different ways. I wanted to get your take on returning to the office. Right? You do touch on the pandemic and the processes by which managers need to be mindful and need to be aware of. Everyone has things going on at home, the whole self, all of those different things. But now we're starting to see sort of the wheels churning of some companies saying, hey, junior employees, you're going to be back in the office come June, or hey, we're going to be virtual all year, and they're making those choices now. What advice would you give a manager, somebody owning a startup, a small business owner, on figuring out the right processes to make these decisions, and to me, more importantly, make sure their employees are, one, aware, two, on board, and three, feel a part of the decision-making process?
Yeah, well, some of my comments are going to be are going to be rear view mirror.
Sure.
And unfortunately, a lot of the critical time has already passed for leaders to really engage with their people around these decisions. It's not too late, but if you're a manager or a leader who has said kind of unilaterally, okay, everybody, we're going back in the office and you don't have any choice about it, that I can almost guarantee you is going to fall flat. The businesses, and I was just in an external meeting of a group this morning on this very topic, and the businesses that are seeing much more success have been collaborative. They've used various survey techniques to really understand what it is that their people need out of the new hybrid, or the word I heard this morning was elastic work environment. Workspaces need to be fundamentally changed, much more open, and the private office is likely a thing of the past, unless it's a position where you must have the privacy of an office. But you're going to see much more collaboration spaces and offices used for innovation and strategic planning and solving key challenges. So the primary thing I'd want to get across to, and you and I have talked a lot about trust and accountability.
Right.
To build that organizational trust, make sure that your people are part of the decision, and then make decisions and follow through on them. Not everybody's going to love the final decision, but as long as you've been inclusive in the process, and we all know that diversity and inclusion is a huge part of the corporate narrative and story today. Inclusivity means a lot of different things, and this is one place where inclusion and getting the voices of most is really important.
It makes a lot of sense and seems simple, to be honest, when you explain it. But there are so many decision factors that are happening. And there are, you mentioned the ego before. We talk about that at length in the podcast, about how certain managers or leaders will think, well, my way or the highway, I got to make these choices. I have to be the leader. And it kind of transitions me to the curveball. I have one more question after that. But on page, what am I on here? 184 of the Balancing Act, as you see here. You say, and I agree wholeheartedly, being in a leadership role is like being on stage, where where every expression and move you make is magnified. In times of crisis, this magnification is amplified even further. Our teams will read a great deal into our demeanor and tone of voice. Leaders must be calm, persistent, and thoughtful. And that struck me because of the conversations we've had, but also what you were just discussing around you need to be inclusive. You also need to be calm, and you need to balance. I know, shocking I use that word here. So many different factors that might be tugging at you. And it all comes back to me then for that self-reflection, meditation, mindfulness of being able to quiet some of those pushes and understand it. Do you feel, before I ask the last question of our session, and if you have questions for Andy in the future, find him on LinkedIn. You can follow him on LinkedIn. Plenty of thought leadership still coming your way. Season 1 of The Balancing Act is out. You know what that means. There's going to be a season 2 and a season 3. So you'll be able to hear from Andy as well there. Find that again on iTunes and Google and across all your podcasting apps. But do you find yourself now virtually to be more cognizant of your tone, more cognizant of how you're using your face, how you're communicating? Or do you feel as though virtual or in person, it's still the same process? I need to be centered, mindful, and straightforward with my team.
I actually find that it's harder virtually to do that, because all I've got is this flat panel screen and this camera and these 2 other screens that nobody can see, but there's all sorts of stuff on them. It's a lot easier for me to get distracted and lose track of my both self-awareness, situational awareness, and self-control and self-regulation. That leaders and managers need to apply. What you just quoted brings you back to the front of the front part of the book, which is, so I'm a boater, and there's a section in the boat called "You're Responsible for Your Own Wake." Many leaders have a very difficult time grasping the fact that their words are amplified, that people are literally hanging on every word. And and as you rise in the organization, the probability of missteps, the probability of saying something just a little bit out of character, a little bit differently, can send an entire group spinning. What did he mean by that? Are we all getting fired? What's happening? Blah, 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 blah. And you really, really have to be careful. And it's that balance between being directive and decisive, moving the business forward, and trying to and doing your best. Not try, as Yoda would say, there's only do, no try, right? So that, doing our very best to ensure that what we're saying is thoughtful, and it has the highest probability of being interpreted the way that we intend it to be.
The book Balancing Act has been out since April 6th. You can find it across all of your major retailers. Again, we have a promo code going for the next month or so, starting at 8 o'clock tonight, 20 Temte 2021. I'll share the link again in the comments section. But I wanted to close out by trying to tie many of the themes together. And there is a term that's used a lot, continuous transformation, right? The idea that we are constantly in business having to evolve, having to change. And when you sort of dig your heels in and say, this is our product, this is who we are, that's when you get left behind. Somebody else will come around and pass you. Continuous transformation sounds exhausting to me. It sounds like it's a constant change, a constant process, but it's not necessarily a negative thing. You discuss entropy, the idea of falling apart and how we have to put ourselves back together again. How have you continued to transform and evolve and grow over the past few months, even since this book sort of was to the editors and went through the processes of it being printed? How have you seen, or how have you tried to make sure that continuous transformation and evolution is part of your day-to-day as an employee, as a manager, as a human being?
Yeah, so I during the pandemic, I found myself operating on autopilot more than I wanted.
Absolutely.
that the subconscious took over, because the boundaries within which we're all living were much more constrained. And so it's very easy to get up, brush your teeth, take a shower, walk the 10 steps into the home office, right? And then the refrigerator is over there. We just, it was very easy for our subconscious to kick in and allow that to operate our lives. What dawned on me is that waking up and being purposefully intentional about the plan for the day, about how I was going to carry myself, learning from the mistakes and the errors of the previous day, the previous week, being purposely intentional about, I already said planning, but I'm talking about business planning, goal setting, etc. I believe, and it is work, because our active memories are so small.
Right.
And it takes real effort to be purposefully intentional. But I think we can all have a higher probability of coming out of this pandemic with success, having our businesses have success, if we become more purposefully intentional in our actions and how we carry ourselves and how our businesses function.
Intentionality makes a whole load of sense of just how we're doing things day in, day out. I make a lot of parallels on the podcast to family life, and how a lot of what you talk about in the book can be very much just personal and professional and familial growth of understanding. And I think being aware, being introspective, and being intentional goes a long way in all of those facets. Andy, I want to thank you for your time. I want to remind everyone, obviously, Amazon, Target, wherever you buy books, the Balancing Act is available. I am through one read of it. I'm going back to the dog ears and making sure I'm getting everything right. I don't manage people right now. I've managed people in the past, but I am using this with my kids, and I'm using it as a way to try to better myself as a dad. No, we've talked about the concept of no on the podcast, trying to, filter that through a different lens from time to time. But I want to congratulate you on the book launch. It's a fantastic read. I suggest everyone check it out. Congratulations also on a great story career that will continue to grow at Kaplan with the focus on corporate learning. Any final words for employees, for managers, for people out there who might be interested in your book, but not quite sure how it applies to them?
Yeah, just, let's be more conscious of what we're doing. And we talk a lot about diversity. Diversity means a lot of different things other than the more common definitions of that. And what I mean by diversity is take in other opinions, open those ears. Let's listen to each other a bit more carefully without our blockers and our blinders coming on. The world needs more understanding, and I do hope that this book will help us become a bit less polarized, a bit more understanding of those around us, because we're all on this pale blue dot together, and it's the only one that we have.
I was looking to my third screen here, where a message on LinkedIn came in privately to me saying someone was purchasing the book. They didn't put it in the comment section, but we do have one over here on LinkedIn who said they're interested, so we'll check that out. Apparently my lights are telling me it's time to go, Andy, so yes. This automatic light has shut off, but appreciate the work, appreciate the conversations, and everyone be sure to check out The Balancing Act, both the book and the podcast, available at Amazon and, of course, across all of your podcasting apps. Until next time, thanks so much for watching our live stream right here on the Kaplan page.